Hi, this is your host Apil Bhartiya, and welcome to our brand new episode of Let's Talk at KubeCon here in Detroit. And today we have with us once again Austin Parker, Head of Developer Relations at Lightstep. Austin, it's great to see you in person.
I know, fantastic, right? We've talked so much online, and now we get to meet each other in person at KubeCon.
And the fact is that I love VR, I love all online, but the chemistry when you meet someone in person is totally different.
It totally is, and obviously, the past couple of years we've all had to do a lot online, and I've done a lot of virtual events and things, but it's really exciting to kind of come back to a KubeCon in North America in Detroit and just meet everyone in person again. So it's been great.
I feel that there is a beauty of both worlds. Like with the virtual, the beauty is that you don't have to get out of the way to meet certain people. With online, you can meet whenever you want, with whoever you want, right? You're not limited to a certain community. But with the in-person, once again, the chemistry, the trust that you build when you sit down with somebody, share a beer or drink, is unmatched. So talk about how has been your experience in person here at KubeCon when you met a lot of colleagues and friends?
Well, one of the things that's really exciting about being here in person is that one of the hardest things when you're kind of virtual really is getting that sort of raw feedback about what's going on in sort of technology in the world and with your products. And as someone that works in developer relations, I have to talk to developers, right? So you might have seen in the news, one of the things that we're really excited to kind of talk about here at KubeCon this year is our announcement of UQL, or Unified Query Language for Telemetry, and how that really helps developers make fully observable Kubernetes applications out of the box. That has been probably the most exciting thing about actually having that in-person experience, because it's something, I can go and I can show you, I can say, hey, go read this web page, right, and then come back. But when you're standing next to someone at a keyboard and you can actually kind of go through and you can show them the queries, you can sit down and type things out and see how it actually does in the computer and watch their reactions, like that's really exciting, and it gives you a lot of great feedback about the impact that your work is making.
Let's talk a bit about VR here at KubeCon. Any new announcement either you made prior to the event or at the event?
So there's a couple of really cool things in sort of the observability and Lightstep world in general, right? On the OpenTelemetry side, we recently announced a demo of OpenTelemetry that lets people go and play around with OpenTelemetry, see how it actually works, how it's implemented in practice. We're also happy to announce OpenTelemetry metrics have reached stability, and they're being rolled out across a variety of languages. There's actually a blog post that just went up about that. And on the Lightstep side, we're really excited to fully support OpenTelemetry metrics. We're able to fully support the OpenTelemetry demo, and we actually released a new something that we're only showing off early at KubeCon. I wrote a blog post about this, but it's Unified Observability for Kubernetes applications that leverages that new OpenTelemetry metrics technology to let you kind of pivot from a metrics query in Kubernetes into an application level trace. And so you're able to correlate, something that happens that you see via Kubernetes monitoring with the actual, root cause, as it were, from an application trace in your pods.
When we have had this discussion so many times, the evolution of observability, and these days we talk about everything as code. Yeah. Infrastructure as code, it simplifies things. So talk a bit about, once again, what's going on from the perspective of as code in the observability space.
That's a really good question. Like you said, infrastructure as code. We've seen, I believe there's actually been some announcements even today at KubeCon about the Kubernetes and sort of cloud native world becoming more shifting all that left, right? Shifting the configuration management, shifting CI/CD, and try to get everything just defined in a way that can be versioned and tracked, and in a way that I think what it really comes down to actually is, we're not putting everything into YAML just because everyone likes YAML. But what we find is that if you can have these repeatable best practices around version control and around the ability of people to have a kind of a standard template for like knowing this is what I need to do, this is how I need to write it, this is where it needs to go, and I can track this all in the same way across my entire application stack, then you get better results. You get faster deployments, you get more reliable deployments, and observability as code is really taking that same concept and pushing it, again, most of the time, what I see a lot is people think of observability as like a day two. They think of it, all right, I got to get my application written, I have to get it deployed. And people will spend so much time on things like deployment automation and automation around continuous integration and continuous delivery. But then it comes time to build a dashboard or write an alert, and you're just kind of sitting there typing and looking and typing and looking and typing and looking. And observability as code lets us push all of that down to the same layer as our infrastructure management, our CI/CD. And it also means that our observability becomes testable, right? Because now we can do things like take an integration test. We can look at the observability data that we're getting from running those integration tests or running those blue-green deployments, and then compare historically, what did it look like the last time and the last time, and so on and so on and so forth, and use, just diffing them, right? And being like, hey, did something change that I didn't expect it to? Are things getting slower? Are they getting faster? It's really a really powerful way to conceptualize observability that historically I don't think we've done a great job at. And hopefully this movement towards observability as code is going to empower developers to have more reliable, more observable Kubernetes applications.
And how close it is, either integration may be a wrong word, to their infrastructure as a code strategy plan versus, so these are two different things, or it will be, it will be part of infrastructure cloud plan of the company?
I think it really depends. So one thing that I'm a big advocate of is developers owning their observability, right? Because as an analogy, you wouldn't expect someone else to write your tests, right? If you were a developer and you're coming up with a service, it's your job to write the test for it and the unit test, because you know what it's actually supposed to do. You wouldn't hand your code to someone else and say, okay, go over and write my test now. Observability as code is really that same principle. It's like you as a developer, you understand what your code is supposed to do and your system is supposed to do. So you need to be responsible for writing the observability code and then creating the alerts, right? And creating the dashboards. Observability as code lets us put the tools and the techniques for that in the hands of the developers in a way that's really comfortable for them, so that they don't have to, break out of their state, of the flow state or whatever, right? Like, you're not having to switch between some GUI application in the browser and then your IDE. You can do everything in the same place, and you get the benefits of things like autocomplete, right? You get the benefits of all of the things that make it really easy to write code, make it easy to do observability as code.
Now let's go back to UQL, right?
Yes, UQL.
Yeah, where does that UQL fit in the observability as code?
I'm glad you asked. Observability as code, it's the as code part, right? You need some way to represent a query, because in general, just for the way we think about this, your application is emitting, and Kubernetes and all of your infrastructure emits, just terabytes of observability telemetry data, and that's all going into a database. You need some way to tell the database, like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. UQL is a very new and powerful way to do this. Historically, this data has been sort of segregated from each other by what type of data it is. So if you have logs, they're going to go into some sort of full text search indexed logging database. If you have metrics, they're going to go into Prometheus or Cortex or Thanos or any number of commercial metrics database solutions. And if you have traces, they're going to go into something like Lightstep, or they're going to go into something like Jaeger, or again, many other APM tools. But now you have a problem. You have 3 different data sources, and you have 3 different ways to query that data. And it becomes challenging, because now you have to memorize. Imagine if you wanted to write something in C# and you needed to memorize 2 other languages just to write one program, right? That's hard for developers, and that's frustrating. It really blocks your ability to kind of get up to speed on things. UQL is a single query language for metrics and trace observability data. And in the future, it will support logs as well. So instead of having to memorize, know 3 different things in 3 different databases, you can go and write a query that actually combines, trace data and metric data using the same query representation. And that gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility both in your ability to kind of easily write these queries, but also to make them part of your development cycle through observability as code, because again, you're able to sit down and just use the same language for both.
Thank you for going in detail, because it also shows that it's also making, as you said, developers or DevOps, whatever tag you put on them, their life easier. Yeah. So if we just switch the focus from their perspective, and hey, when they look at UQL, how it makes their task and life easier, they are able to now do a lot of things that they were not able to do earlier.
I think, yeah, certainly with Lightstep, we're able to now go into, through our APIs, through our Terraform provider, and through our UI, you're able to go and you're able to build queries in UQL, visualize the results of those queries, do things like plot latency, ask questions, right? Like, what's the P95 latency for customers that are accessing my application from Singapore or from Duluth? What's the rate of requests that I'm getting to this new endpoint, but only for people that have a feature flag, right? Like, those are the questions that as a developer I need to ask and you need to ask to understand what is going on with your system. Before, you had to kind of figure out how to do this for every different tool, and if you were trying to ask that of your metrics data versus your trace data, you would have to ask it differently. Now you have one language to ask that question, and because it's built into our APIs and built into our Terraform, you're able to create those queries and alerts very early in the process, right? So when you're writing your code and you go in and you say, here's my observability data I want to get out, I know if this value ever gets over some amount, I can just go ahead and write that query in through Terraform, for example, and then when my code gets deployed, it'll automatically get an alert created, defined in UQL, that lets me make sure that, hey, that alert's never getting tripped, right? So that's a way that you as a developer can own your observability, and that you can own the ability of your DevOps colleagues, your SRE teams, just in guaranteeing that applications that we write and services we deploy are truly observable out of the box.
You folks recently also acquired Era Software. Talk a bit about this acquisition, and once again how it fits into the big Lightstep, strategy and story.
That was a really exciting moment for both everyone at Era and everyone at Lightstep. We have acquired, actually their first week was like 2 weeks ago, I think, of a recording, and they've already come in and made just some huge progress in integrating into the Lightstep culture, and we're really excited. So for people that don't know, Era is a logging database provider. They have a database that was called EraDB, and we are, as people know, as you may know, it's hard to just do one thing now, right? Our vision at Lightstep, the reason that we built UQL, is because we believe that the only way to have observability is through the unification of telemetry. You need not just traces, not just metrics, and not just logs. You need to bring all these things together with a single query language that lets you explore and understand your system. So Era software acquisition is really part of that. It is a way to accelerate our ability to deliver a logging solution over the next, less than a year time range, right? And it's a great team. We're extremely excited to have them, and we're hoping to have more to talk about with Era software. With our new logging stuff in probably sometime early next year. But it's what I've seen internally already is truly transformative, right? We are able to bring all these different sources of data together, give you a single consistent way to query them and understand what's going on, and use that to actually ask interesting questions that can help you build business value, right? Through things like SLOs, service maps. It's a super exciting time to be at Lightstep, and if you haven't checked us out recently, or if you looked a while ago, we have grown a lot recently. ServiceNow has been a great parent company to us. The acquisition obviously is a huge show of trust in our vision for unified observability, and we're really happy to be part of the ServiceNow family.
Austin, once again, thank you so much for sitting down with me, and I cannot tell you how great it feels to be in the same room
face to face.
Face to face. So thanks for sharing all those insights, and as usual, I look forward to talk to you again online, but I wish we can do more of these in person. So
Definitely.
Hopefully I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful sitting down with you, and I loved every moment of it.